All right, welcome back to the channel. It is definitely fight week because Errol Spence Jr. was on ESPN with Max Kellerman and Stephen A. Smith talking about boxing. One pro, one casual fan, and whatever it is that you want to call Stephen A. Smith. Max Kellerman can't stand the dude, tries to get Errol Spence Jr., tries to bait Errol Spence Jr. into some nonsense. Errol responds like a true savage that he is. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. So Errol Spence Jr. goes on First Take with Max Kellerman and Stephen A. Smith to talk about the Danny Garcia fight with that he has coming up this weekend in Dallas. Big fight, doing the rounds, so you know that this is the time for this fight, man. And let me tell you, dude, Errol Spence Jr., I love this dude, man. The guy is so straightforward. He just is a very truthful person. Like, I appreciate that he's called Errol the Truth Spence because, you know, they call him the truth because he's the truth. Like, he can really fight. But also, as a side benefit, this dude really does shoot straight, tells you what he thinks. Even if you don't like it, the dude says what you think, man, and I gotta respect him, man. So he gets on there, you know, looking agitated, looking irritated, and really just wanting to get, I can tell, really just wanting to get, you know, to the fight, get past the weigh-in, you know, eat some food, you know, that whole nine. But he's got to answer questions from Stephen A. Smith and Max Kellerman, dude. And Max Kellerman, I used to like Max Kellerman, but that just told me, that just means that I used to be naive, right? Like, I am pretty sure that if I knew what I knew now, back when I thought I liked Max Kellerman, like back when he used to speak really highly of Pernell Whitaker and, you know, represented Pernell Whitaker very well when the mainstream boxing wasn't doing that. But once Max Kellerman got his foot in the door and he became Mr. Corporate, and in this interview, he once again is Mr. Corporate, they, of course, come first at Errol Spence and ask Errol Spence about it. And I'm going to get to the savage part because his answer at the end of this is just absolutely savage. But first things first, they ask him about his health, right? And they say, well, the thing that we really want to know, Errol, is, are you ruined or not? I know you keep telling us over and over again that you are 100%, you can fight, but are you damaged? You know, it's just so hard for us to believe it. Now, that's why I'm saying Errol Spence Jr. is one of these guys that is just, the dude is such a truthful guy because, and he said it here and he's also said it in other interviews, that he understands that people will think that, you know, that he couldn't go through that type of car accident and survive. But the fact of the matter is, and he reiterates it, he's like, you know, it seems hard to believe. It might even be hard for him to believe, but it is what it is. He said that, you know, that after the accident, the doctor said, look, you don't have any broken ligaments. You don't have any broken bones. You don't have any torn or ruptured ligaments. And then they said that he did things like put him on a stretch, you know, put him on reaction tests just to see, you know, if, you know, how his reaction time was to things. And they're like, everything is normal. You're very lucky. You're good to go, right? But it's reasonable for people to ask the question about whether or not he really is all the way together. But he said, look, man, I'm 100% and I'm ready to go. But so then this is where Max Kellerman come on, man. This is just so corporate. He tries to put Errol Spence Jr. in a position where he's asking him about a fight that Errol Spence Jr. ain't having right now. That's the Terence Crawford fight. So he says, you know, the fight that everybody wants to see, that everybody cares about, is the Terence Crawford fight, right? When do you think you'll make the Terence Crawford fight? As if Errol Spence Jr. is the only person that is responsible for this fight not having happened yet. Did I say that right? That Errol Spence Jr. is the reason that the fight hasn't happened yet, which is absolutely ridiculous. Max Kellerman knows perfectly well what the situation is with Bob Arum and the PBC You also know that you guys don't have the budget. You're not promoting Terence Crawford. Why would somebody say, hey, yeah, let me fight the guy right now that you guys aren't even promoting? You know what I mean? Like, the fact that Max Kellerman would say, yes, Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence Jr., that's the best fight that could possibly be made in all of boxing. I don't know, man. Did you have him as your number one pound for pound? I don't know. Maybe Max did. Max, every once in a while, will act like he got some sense. Maybe. But nah, for the majority, it was ESPN pushing Lomachenko. So I just sitting there with ESPN being the number one reason why they and Bob Arum, the number one reason that Terence Crawford doesn't have the name cachet, according to the PBC, necessary to make the fight right now. Because the Top Rank, the business partner of ESPN, didn't push it. But anyway, they work for ESPN. That's what you're supposed to expect. But then, and Errol just kept responding like, look, I can't even think about any other fights until I get past this one. My mind's on Danny Garcia. So then they start talking about Danny Garcia. And that's when Errol Spence Jr. his answer was just so raw. He says with Danny that he can do, he can either outbox him or he can slug. Well, actually what he said was he talked about his last two fights with Mikey Garcia and with Sean Porter, because Keith Thurman was saying that, he thought that a lot of people, believe that Sean Porter won the fight, and, he doesn't know how Errol's going to react to Danny, after having seen, Errol get touched so much by Sean Porter. And Errol's response was just like, look, I could have just outboxed him easily from the outside, but he wanted to come forward. So, hey, man, I obliged him and we went to a fight. He said the same thing. He said, Mikey Garcia, people said I couldn't outbox him, so I outboxed him. Now, here's a little bit where I think that Errol might be self-justifying a little bit, because if he says that he knows that he didn't have the conditioning, and he's mentioned that he didn't have the conditioning that he should have in either of, and I think he might have been referring to like 3 fights. The Carlos Ocampo fight that only went around, the Mikey Garcia fight, and the Sean Porter fight. He felt like he was not in, his absolute best physical condition during those fights. So I think it might be, it's not a coincidence. It's a benefit that Errol has the ability to do both, box somebody from the outside if they're tired, but also if the guy wants to be aggressive, just to have the grit and determination to bite down and go with a guy like Sean Porter like that, especially if you're not all the way in your best condition. But when Errol Spence Jr. ended and said, look, my job in this fight is to give Danny Garcia the worst beating of his career, I think that is absolutely the best answer, because it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get a knockout, right? Because Max Kellerman was trying to push him into that, like, well, just tell me what's going to be the outcome of this fight. How do you see this playing out? Do you see it being a knockout? And is it fair for me to hold you accountable if you're not able to knock out Danny Garcia? Like, see why I don't like Steve Kellerman? Max Kellerman, is it going to be okay for me to hold you accountable if you don't knock out Danny Garcia? Even though Max Kellerman and Sean Porter, and Stephen A. Smith just spent, 30 seconds, 40 seconds, however long it was of this interview, building up Sean Porter and saying how they thought Sean Porter was such a tough guy and such a hard fight. If he doesn't, or excuse me, not Sean Porter, but Danny Garcia is such a tough competitor and such a hard fight. Well, if he's such a tough competitor and such a hard fight and nobody's ever knocked Danny Garcia out or convincingly beat him up, why would you be holding Errol Spence Jr. coming off of a car accident, right? Why would you be holding him responsible like that and saying, well, if you don't knock out Danny Garcia like I say you should knock Danny Garcia out, then I'm going to hold you accountable? And what is that accountable that he would hold him? What, you're not going to invite or not going to vote for Errol Spence Jr. to be number one on your pound for pound list? We already know that's not going to take place, because after all of the stuff that Floyd Mayweather Jr. did, including beating Manny Pacquiao, Max Kellerman never gave Floyd Mayweather Jr. that credit. Max Kellerman thinks Manny Pacquiao is the greatest fighter of this century, even though Floyd Mayweather Jr. beat him and beat guys that beat Manny Pacquiao. So, like I said, Max is pure company, dude, but really good interview from Errol. And I'm telling you, Danny might be in a lot of trouble, dog, because this dude seems real, real hungry. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know yours. And with that, I'm out. Peace.